At my daughter's wedding, my husband introduced his mistress as his future wife. As a shocked murmur rippled through the reception hall, I was the only one who clapped. But amidst that suffocating atmosphere, it was the groom's father who quietly stepped forward and bowed his head deeply in my direction. On the day my daughter got married, I thought my only job was to sit quietly in the front row, smile at the right moments, wipe away my tears at the right moments, and hold her hand one last time before giving her away to another man. A man I believed to be far more decent than her father. But life rarely allows a woman who has endured in silence for too long to find peace so easily, especially when the man sitting next to me, my husband of nearly 30 years, was preparing to turn our daughter's wedding into a stage to showcase his own cruelty. My name is Evelyn. I am 52 years old. My husband, Henry, is a man who appears incredibly successful from the outside. He speaks with measured authority, wears impeccably pressed suits, and is greeted with respect wherever he goes in our coastal California town. But I am the only one who knows the man behind the expensive tailoring and polite smiles. He is a man accustomed to trampling on his wife's dignity to maintain his sense of total control. He views himself as the master of the house, the benevolent dictator who dictates everything: my joys, my sorrows, the food on the table, my sleep, and the ultimate fate of the woman who spent her youth standing in his shadow. That morning, in the bridal suite of a beautiful oceanfront resort in Santa Barbara, I fastened the buttons of a deep navy blue vintage silk dress that my mother had left me before she passed away. It wasn't brand new, nor was it as expensive as the designer gowns in the boutique windows downtown. She had once told me that a woman's life might be made difficult by her husband, but she must never let her children see her break on the most important day of their lives. That very sentence made me stand up straight before the mirror. I added a touch of blush to cheeks that now bore the faint lines of age, reminding myself that today was Maya's day. It was not a day for me to cry over Henry anymore. Maya is my only daughter, 27 years old, gentle but not weak, soft-hearted but not blind. She grew up in a house filled with more heavy sighs than laughter. Yet she still knew how to love, how to work hard, and how to step out of her mother's shadow. She became an independent woman with a career, self-respect, and a man named Noah, who loved her with a quiet, unshowy decency. Noah made no grand, flowery promises, but his actions made me believe my daughter would not repeat her mother's life. The reception was held in a gorgeous ballroom overlooking the Pacific. Outside, palm trees swayed in the late afternoon sun. Inside, warm ambient lighting washed over the tables. White roses, crisp linens, and the soft melody of a grand piano filled the air. Everything was so beautiful, it made you believe that true happiness could actually be curated with fresh flowers and expensive candles. But from the moment we entered the hall, I noticed Henry acting strangely. He didn't look at Maya for more than a few seconds, showed no emotion when she walked down the aisle, and didn't even bother to ask if I had eaten. He constantly checked his phone, a bizarre smirk occasionally pulling at the corner of his mouth. It was a smile that a wife of 30 years can instantly decode. It wasn't the smile of a proud father. It was the smile of a man waiting for his moment of triumph. I used to fear that smile. I used to fear the sound of his key in the lock at 11 p.m. I feared the smell of bourbon on his breath, the sound of his expensive leather shoes dragging across the hardwood floor, and his cold, sharp questions. "Where's dinner? Why is the house a mess? Why do you always look so exhausted?" I used to be so afraid that just the sound of him slamming a water glass on the table would make my heart contract. But that morning, looking at him smiling at our daughter's wedding, I wasn't afraid anymore. I only felt a mild, distant pity, because I knew that some men think they are stepping onto a stage to claim glory, when in reality, they are pulling the curtain back on their own trial. Toward the end of the dinner, when the MC invited the father of the bride to give his toast, Henry immediately stood up, adjusted his tie, smoothed his hair, and walked to the microphone with an air of absolute arrogance. He looked out at the 100 or so guest relatives from both sides, Maya and Noah's friends, and business partners he had specifically invited to bulk up his audience. He began in that deep, falsely warm voice I had heard 1,000 times at family gatherings. He thanked everyone for coming, thanked the groom's family for welcoming his daughter, and thanked his new son-in-law for loving Maya. For the first few minutes, everything sounded so normal that if I hadn't noticed his knuckles turning white as he gripped the microphone, I might have thought he was actually playing the role of a loving father. Then, he paused. The room fell dead silent. People probably thought he was choked up with emotion. He wasn't. Henry smiled, turned toward the main double doors of the ballroom, and spoke in a voice so clear it was lethal. On this joyous day for my daughter, I also want to take this opportunity to introduce to our families the woman who will be walking by my side in my next chapter of life. My future wife. A collective gasp shattered the air, sounding like a crystal glass shattering on marble. I clearly heard Maya whisper, "Mom." I heard Noah take a sharp breath. Relatives murmured, chairs scraped, and someone muttered, "What the hell is he talking about?" But I didn't turn to look at anyone. I kept my eyes fixed on the grand double doors swinging open. A woman in a striking, deep red evening gown walked in, chin tilted up in pure arrogance, acting as if she were the second bride of the evening. Her name was Chloe. She was nearly 20 years younger than me, with perfectly curled hair, bold red lips, and a diamond necklace sparkling at her throat. She strutted on stilettos so thin that the click of her heels seemed designed to carve the humiliation Henry intended for me even deeper. She walked straight up to the stage and stood next to my husband, letting him wrap an arm around her waist in front of my daughter, my in-laws, and my entire family. Henry looked down at me, his eyes full of defiance, and continued, "Evelyn and I haven't had real feelings for each other for a long time. Now that our daughter is settled, I think it's time I live true to my own happiness. I hope you all understand and wish us well." Nobody clapped. Nobody said a word. The silence was so heavy that the hum of the air conditioning became deafening. Maya's face had drained of color, her trembling hands clutching the fabric of her wedding dress. I knew that in that moment, my daughter wasn't agonizing over the fact that her father had another woman. She was agonizing over the fact that he had chosen her wedding day to shred her mother's dignity in front of the world. And then, breaking the suffocating silence, I stood up. I clapped. Slowly, clearly, not loudly, but enough to echo through the dead quiet room. Henry froze. Chloe smirked, thinking I had conceded defeat, but I only smiled a smile of such profound calm that even I was surprised by it after 30 years of being made to feel worthless. "Bravo, Henry," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "Finally, you managed to show everyone exactly who you are." At that exact moment, from the groom's family table, Noah's father, Arthur Vance, slowly stood up. He didn't look at Henry. He didn't look at Chloe. He walked straight over to me, stopped right in front of my table, and bowed his head deeply. So deeply that the entire ballroom held its breath a second time. When he straightened up, his voice was low but commanded absolute authority. "Evelyn, you have endured enough. It's time to put everything back where it belongs." I placed my hand on the designer tote bag resting on the chair beside me. Inside was a brown manila envelope, barely an inch thick, but enough to bring down the entire theatrical production Henry had spent months directing. When I unzipped the bag, for the first time that evening, I saw my husband's face go completely pale. I pulled the envelope out slowly, so slowly that Henry couldn't hide the panic crawling into the corners of his eyes. Chloe, meanwhile, stood beside him looking annoyed, like a spoiled woman used to getting her way. She hadn't yet realized that the fiery red dress wasn't making her look like a winner. It just made her look like a bloodstain on the pristine white linen of my daughter's wedding day. I heard Maya choke back a sob behind me. She tried to step forward, but Noah gently held her arm not to stop her from defending me, but to keep her from collapsing in front of such cruelty. Arthur Vance remained standing by my side. His posture was straight, his gaze heavy. He wasn't yelling, but his silence carried more weight than a screaming match. And it was his presence that truly made Henry lose his nerve. "Evelyn, what the hell are you doing?" Henry hissed, trying to force a smile, though his mouth twitched. "Today is our daughter's wedding. Don't embarrass the family." I looked at him, and suddenly, the hypocrisy was so laughable it brought tears to my eyes. The man who had just paraded his mistress onto the stage at his daughter's wedding was lecturing me about family dignity. "Do you even remember what the word family means?" I asked softly. Henry froze. Chloe instantly chimed in, her voice shrill and piercing. "Evelyn, stop trying to hold on." Henry made it clear. "Have some self-respect." I turned my gaze to her. For the first time, I looked at her closely. I looked at the heavy makeup, the sharp eyeliner, the massive diamond glittering on her left hand. Then I looked down at my own hands. Hands that had scrubbed floors in freezing water. Hands that had spoon-fed broth to my sick mother-in-law at 2 a.m. Hands that had clipped coupons to save enough money to pay for Maya's college tuition. I suddenly understood that some women think stealing a man equates to stealing happiness, when in reality, they are just collecting the rotten leftovers that a wife had suffered through for far too long. "Chloe," I said, calling her by her name with total composure. "You don't need to teach me about self-respect. A woman who crashes someone else's daughter's wedding to declare herself the bride's future stepmother doesn't have the right to use that word." Heavy whispers erupted across the room. Several of my relatives were red in the face with fury, while the groom's side sat in stunned silence. Nobody wanted to turn Noah and Maya's special day into a brawl, but no one could pretend they hadn't witnessed this humiliation. Henry stepped down from the stage, intending to snatch the envelope from my hands, but Arthur Vance immediately stepped in his path. He didn't use force, just positioned his shoulder enough to make Henry stop dead in his tracks. "Henry," Arthur said, articulating every syllable, "you should let Evelyn finish. Because right now, the only person embarrassing both our families isn't her." Henry went pale but tried to push back. "This is a private family matter. Arthur, don't overstep." Arthur looked him dead in the eye, his tone unwavering. "When you choose to air your private affairs at a microphone during our children's wedding, in front of my family, my son, and my daughter-in-law, it is no longer a private matter." The words lodged in Henry's throat. I opened the manila envelope and pulled out the first document. It was a joint bank account statement. I hadn't obtained it through illegal snooping, which Henry would immediately accuse me of, but legally, through my lawyer, asserting my rights over marital assets. "Henry," I said, my voice carrying over the silent room. "For the last 10 years, every single month, you told me our retirement savings were locked away safely. You told me I wasn't smart enough to understand investments, that I shouldn't ask, that I couldn't touch it. When the washing machine broke, you told me we didn't have the money to replace it. So, could you please explain to me where, in the last 8 months, $400,000 has gone?" A collective gasp swept through the room like wind hitting glass. Chloe jumped, looking at Henry, while Henry immediately shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? My money, my investments. What does a housewife know about business? Investments?" I turned to the second page, holding it up just enough for the guests at the front tables to see the official seal of a prominent Los Angeles real estate firm. A $250,000 wire transfer for a down payment on a luxury condo in Santa Monica. The co-signer is Chloe. $30,000 at a jewelry boutique. $40,000 for imported Italian furniture. Not to mention the luxury hotels, the 5-star dinners, the first-class flights, all drawn from the joint account you told me was our nest egg. Chloe's jaw dropped, but her shock wasn't out of shame. It was because the luxury condo she had been bragging about to her friends was now being exposed in front of 100 people. "Henry, you told me that condo was bought with your personal trust fund," she stammered, her voice shaking. Henry gritted his teeth. "Shut up, Chloe." Watching this play out, I didn't feel the triumphant vindication I thought I would. I just felt tired, a bone-deep exhaustion, because for decades, I had lived with a man who could lie to everyone with the exact same calm expression. I remembered the mornings I drove to 3 different grocery stores just to save a few dollars on chicken. I remembered the year Maya was a high school senior and needed money for SAT prep and college applications. I had to sell my grandmother's pearl necklace. Henry had coldly told me that if Maya wanted to go to a good school, she needed to earn a scholarship. But that exact same month, he had taken Chloe to a luxury resort in Maui. The $8,000 receipt was right there in the stack of papers in my hand. Maya burst into tears. "Dad." Her voice pierced right through me. It wasn't because I was weak for Henry, but because I knew that no matter how grown up a child is, seeing their father stripped down to his absolute, selfish core shatters a piece of their childhood forever. Henry looked at Maya. For a second, I think he intended to play the role of the misunderstood father. But my daughter's eyes left no room for his lies. "Maya, sweetie, don't listen to your mother. She's hysterical. Adult matters are complicated. I have my reasons." Noah stepped forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it was solid as oak. "Sir, today is our wedding day. If you had reasons, You could have explained them tomorrow. But you chose to hurt Maya's mother in front of her. Don't expect my wife to stand by you. Henry was stunned. He probably never expected the quiet son-in-law to defend Maya so fiercely to his face. I looked at Noah and felt a wave of relief. At least Maya hadn't chosen the wrong man. But it wasn't over. Arthur signaled to the venue manager to turn off the slideshow of wedding photos playing on the screens behind the stage. He turned to me. Evelyn, do you want to stop here? I knew what he meant. He was giving me one last chance to preserve some silence for Henry, for Maya, for the guests. But I also knew that if I stopped now, Henry would go back to the house, smash things, shift the blame, threaten me, and somehow spin the narrative to make me the villain. I had swallowed my pride for too long. I shook my head slightly. No, Arthur. I've been silent for nearly 30 years. Tonight, I'm saying everything. Henry roared. Don't you dare! I looked him dead in the eyes. And for the first time, I didn't look away. I dare. Because as of today, I am no longer a woman living on your pathetic charity. I pulled out the final document from the envelope. The paper my lawyer had called the fatal blow to Henry's entire scheme. As soon as Henry read the bold print at the top of the page, the blood drained from his face. It wasn't panic anymore. It was the sheer terror of a man who realized his deepest secret had been unearthed. Chloe peered over, confused. What is that, baby? I placed the paper on the table, my voice slowing down. This is a contract for a $150,000 loan from a private, hard-money lender under Henry's name, and he illegally forged my signature on a quitclaim deed to use our marital home as collateral. The air in the room practically froze. Arthur closed his eyes for a brief second. Henry stumbled half a step backward. I looked at my husband, my heart strangely at peace. You didn't just betray me. You committed mortgage fraud. You pledged our joint property to fund your new life. You thought that after this wedding, you'd force me to sign a lopsided divorce settlement and wipe your hands clean. Henry opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I reached down, picked up a linen napkin, and gently dabbed the corner of my eye. Not because I was weak, but because I refused to let tears blur the most lucid moment of my entire life. Henry, you used to tell me I was a useless woman. Well, today, this useless woman is here to teach you that silence does not equal ignorance, endurance does not equal stupidity, and being a mother does not mean I have to let someone else trample on my life. Chloe took notice, her hand instinctively hiding the massive diamond on her finger, as if terrified the ballroom lights would expose exactly whose money bought it. Henry stood completely rigid, lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes bloodshot not with remorse, but with the explosive rage of a man whose shadow of a wife had just ripped off his mask in front of high society. A few older guests at the groom's tables whispered among themselves, but nobody left. Because in that moment, this was no longer a simple scandal of infidelity. It was a decades-old fracture in a family finally bursting wide open, revealing exactly how a wife had been suffocated beneath a veneer of upper-class perfection. Suddenly, Henry let out a dry, harsh scoff. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You're good, Evelyn. You really prepped for this, didn't you? Playing the sweet, innocent wife all these years. Turns out you were sneaking behind my back, colluding with lawyers and outsiders to ruin your husband. You think some papers scare me? Let me tell you something. I made the money. I make the decisions. What have you ever contributed to this house besides doing the laundry and cooking dinner? That sentence struck the very place that used to hurt the most. But it didn't break me the way it would have years ago. I looked at him, and for a fleeting second, I saw my 23-year-old self. The girl who believed marriage was a partnership, who thought that if she worked hard, compromised, and gave everything, her home would be a sanctuary. I never realized my constant compromising was just feeding the monstrous entitlement of the man standing before me. Before I could answer, my older brother, Thomas, bolted up from a table near the back. His voice was shaking with rage. Henry, how the hell can you say that? When your mother was bedridden in hospice for 7 years, who bathed her? Who changed her sheets? Who spoon-fed her soup while you were out at business dinners because you refused to waste money on a home nurse? You'd come home, drop your briefcase, and demand a hot meal. And now you say my sister contributed nothing? Henry whipped around, his face dark. Thomas, this is between my wife and me. Stay out of it. Thomas took a step forward, but his wife grabbed his arm, terrified he'd throw a punch at his niece's wedding. If I don't speak up, who will? For decades, my sister protected your reputation. Did you think her family was blind? At that moment, Maya let go of Noah's hand and stepped down from the stage. The heavy train of her wedding dress made every step look agonizingly difficult. Her eyes were red, but her voice was much steadier than I expected. Dad, apologize to Mom right now. Henry stared at his daughter, stunned, as if her demand was the ultimate betrayal. Maya, sweetie, you're young. You don't understand how complicated marriages get. Your mother is just trying to humiliate me. Maya shook her head, tears finally spilling over. No, Dad. The only person humiliating anyone here is you. Today is my wedding. But you didn't think about me for a single second. You brought her here, introduced her as your future wife, and forced my mother to sit here and take it. Did you ever stop to think how that would make me feel? Henry opened his mouth, but the excuse I did it for my happiness died in his throat, because under Maya's agonizing stare, his selfish logic looked exactly as grotesque as it was. Chloe, standing off to the side, was losing her patience. She tugged at Henry's sleeve. Her voice was whiny, and because Henry was still near the microphone stand, the whole room caught it. Babe, fix this, hurry up. I'm so embarrassed. You promised tonight was my coming out to your society friends. Why is it turning into this? A few guests let out cold, mocking laughs. Henry whipped around and glared at her. Will you shut up? Chloe recoiled, her face turning chalk white. It was probably the first time she had seen the man who called her his soulmate use that tone with her in public. Arthur Vance finally stepped onto the stage and took the microphone from the trembling MC. He didn't shout, he didn't grandstand, but his calm demeanor commanded the room. If I may say a few words, as Noah's father and someone who values the integrity of his family, today is meant to be a celebration for our children. Nobody wanted this to become a courtroom. But when Henry unilaterally decided to use this joyful occasion to legitimize an illicit affair, while simultaneously hiding marital assets, what Evelyn brought forward tonight isn't slander. It is a wife's legal right to defend herself. Henry gritted his teeth. Arthur, don't take the moral high ground with me. My real estate investments and loans aren't illegal. I have lawyers too. Arthur nodded slowly. You should definitely call them. But first, you should know this. That condo in Santa Monica you put a deposit on? The escrow hasn't closed yet. According to the contract, if the buyer provides fraudulent financial information, or if the funds are subject to a marital dispute, the seller has the right to freeze the transaction and refer it to their legal team. I had my firm notify the escrow company this morning to halt everything, Chloe shrieked. What? No! It has an ocean view. I already picked out the custom Italian marble. Her shrill voice echoed through the ballroom, proving to everyone that the only thing she actually cared about wasn't love or dignity, but a beachfront condo and expensive countertops. Henry snapped at her. Chloe, enough. But the damage was done. Maya looked at Chloe with a mix of disgust and pity, then turned back to her father. Dad, you sold the peace of our family just to buy her a condo? Henry suddenly lost it. He pointed a furious finger at me. This is all your mother's fault. If she knew how to be a real wife, if she was affectionate, if she actually made our house feel like a home, would I have needed to look elsewhere? A woman who walks around looking depressed all day, who only knows how to complain, what man could stand that? That statement silenced the room in a completely different way. Because many of the women sitting at those tables had likely heard some variation of those words in their own lives. The narrative that if a husband strays, the wife must have failed. If a family breaks, the woman didn't hold it together. If she was hurt, she wasn't charming enough to prevent it. I looked at Henry for a long time. Then I spoke, slowly and deliberately. You are right about one thing. I haven't been an agreeable wife for a long time. Because I was exhausted. I was exhausted after staying up all night managing your mother's hospice care while you slept soundly in the guest room. I was exhausted from begging for grocery money while you told me women only know how to spend. I was exhausted from cooking dinners that you complained were cold, while you never once asked if I had eaten. I was so exhausted I didn't have the energy left to put on a pretty smile for you. But Henry, my exhaustion was not a free pass for your infidelity. And it certainly wasn't a license to steal our life savings to fund your mistress. For the first time, Henry didn't immediately fire back. He wasn't used to me speaking this much in front of others, and he certainly wasn't used to a voice that didn't beg or tremble. He looked around, seeing the eyes of his peers, people who once respected him now, glaring at him with icy disdain. He quickly changed tactics, lowering his voice. "Evelyn, all right, that's enough. We'll talk about this at home. Whatever you want financially, we'll settle it. Let's not ruin our daughter's night." I let out a soft laugh. "Even now, you think everything can be bought off." Henry shot me a familiar, threatening glare. "Don't push me, Evelyn." "No," I replied. You pushed me. You pushed me right to this moment." Just then, from the back of the ballroom, a man in a crisp white shirt and a gray suit walked in, holding a black leather briefcase. It was Mike Sterling, the attorney I had been meeting in secret for 3 months. The only person besides Arthur Vance who knew my entire strategy. Mike walked up next to me, gave a polite nod to Arthur, and turned to Henry. "Good evening, Henry. I am Mike Sterling, Evelyn's legal counsel in the upcoming proceedings for asset division, spousal support, and the investigation of hidden marital assets." Henry's eyes bulged. "A lawyer? You brought a damn divorce lawyer to our daughter's wedding?" I looked at him, my voice lighter than air. "No. I brought a lawyer just in case you brought your mistress. And you didn't disappoint me." The words struck Henry like a physical blow. Mike opened his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, his tone devastatingly professional. "In addition to the bank statements Evelyn has shared, we also have audio recordings of Henry discussing with a broker his plan to force Evelyn to sign a post-nuptial agreement waiving her rights to the marital home so he could transfer the deed into an LLC. We don't need to present these here, but they will be submitted to the court if you continue to harass my client." Henry was paralyzed. Chloe stared at him like he was a stranger. "You told me that house would be clean cash once you sold it," she blurted out. Her accidental confession was the final nail in the coffin, shredding whatever was left of Henry's facade. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them to look squarely at the man I had called my husband. "Henry, you weren't just going to leave me. You were going to throw me out on the street." Henry couldn't yell anymore. He was hyperventilating, his eyes darting around looking for an exit. But in that ballroom, every metaphorical door had slammed shut. When I thought the silence had reached its absolute peak, Maya unexpectedly reached up, unpinned her wedding veil, and laid it gently on the table. Her voice trembled, but it was absolute. "If you don't apologize to Mom right now, I am cutting you out of my life. You will not be part of the rest of this reception. You will leave." Henry stared at his daughter, absolutely gutted, as if his own flesh and blood had just handed down his death sentence. The first autumn rains came late that year in California. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon at Eve's Kitchen, a cozy little diner I had opened in a quiet neighborhood. I was sitting by the back window peeling potatoes, listening to the rain tap against the awning, and smelling the damp earth. It was a peaceful scent I had never noticed before. For nearly 30 years, I was always too busy listening for the sound of Henry's key in the lock, worrying if his mood would be foul, if my cooking would be criticized, if I had overspent on groceries. Now, the kitchen was hot, my hands were calloused, and my lower back ached after standing over a griddle all morning. But strangely, the exhaustion didn't make me feel cheap or worthless. Because every pot of soup, every slice of meatloaf, every cherry pie I set on the counter was something I chose to make. I earned my own money. I didn't have to hold my hand out to anyone, and nobody could call me a parasite. Maya stopped by the diner that afternoon. Her belly was showing. She was 4 months pregnant. Noah walked in behind her holding a bag of oranges and a gallon of milk. "Mom," Noah called out immediately. "Don't stand by the stove too long. Maya and I will help you clean up." I looked at my daughter, feeling a mix of love and amusement. "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. Sit down. You're pregnant. Stop rushing around. You're making me nervous." Maya sat on a bar stool near the counter, rubbing her belly. Her eyes were incredibly soft. "I want my baby to know that her grandmother is the strongest woman in the world." My hands paused over the cutting board. My nose stung, but I managed a smile. "She doesn't need to be the strongest. Just tell her that her grandmother used to be very afraid, but eventually learned how to stop being afraid." Noah was quiet. He was always a man of few words, but his silence was a foundation you could build a house on. He bent down to carry a crate of vegetables into the pantry and called back. Mom, I'm gonna replace that flickering bulb over the prep station while I'm here. I watched my son-in-law, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. It wasn't an explosive kind of joy. It felt like being handed a hot mug of tea right after stepping out of a cold storm. Just before dusk, as the last customer left, a beat-up sedan pulled up outside. I was wiping down the counter when Maya gasped softly. Mom! I looked up to see Henry standing under the diner's awning. His gray suit jacket was soaked on one shoulder. His hair was much grayer than the last time I saw him at the courthouse. His face was hollowed out, the old arrogant sneer completely gone. But seeing him didn't trigger the old tremors in my hands. Noah immediately stepped out of the back to stand next to Maya. I set my rag down and asked calmly, "What do you want?" Henry looked at me for a long time. His eyes drifted over the hand-painted sign for the diner, the warm wooden booths, the simmering pots on the stove, and finally rested on Maya's pregnant belly. I think it was the first time he realized he was going to be a grandfather. "Maya, you're pregnant?" Maya was quiet for a few seconds before answering. "Yes." Just one word. So short it hurt, but it perfectly measured the distance between father and daughter. It was no longer a few feet across a diner. It was a chasm created entirely by him. Henry swallowed hard, his voice raspy. I didn't know." Maya didn't cry. She wasn't angry like she had been on her wedding day. She just looked sad. "You never bothered to ask." Henry looked down. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. The same hands that used to point in my face and call me useless, that used to toss grocery money on the counter like charity, that had wrapped around Chloe's waist in front of our family now. They hung awkwardly at his sides, unsure of where to be. "Evelyn," he said my name, and for the first time in decades, it didn't sound like an order. I came to apologize. The diner was so quiet you could hear the rain drumming on the tin roof out back. I didn't answer right away. I always thought that if Henry ever apologized, I would break down, ask him why, force him to explain how he could have crushed me so thoroughly for all those years. But now that the moment was here, I just felt a deep stillness, like a house after a hurricane. The windows were blown out, the residents had moved on, and there was no point in asking the storm to explain itself to the rubble. "Apologize for what?" I asked. Henry looked up, his lips trembling. For treating you so terribly. For Chloe. For Maya's wedding." I looked straight through him. "How about for treating me like an unpaid servant for 30 years? For letting me nurse your mother until I collapsed, while you took all the credit with your family? For nickel and diming my grocery budget while using our life savings to buy diamonds for someone else? For trying to throw me out of the house I poured my blood into?" Henry closed his eyes, his face contorting in pain. "Yes. For all of it." Maya looked away. She probably didn't want her father to see her tearing up. Noah placed a gentle hand on her back. I pulled out a chair and gestured to the one opposite me. "Sit. But let me be clear. Your apology doesn't buy anything. I am not coming back. I am not dropping the financial claims. I am not erasing what happened. And I am not forcing Maya to forgive you." Henry sat down. His posture was hunched, making him look so much smaller than the tyrant who used to suck the oxygen out of our home. "I know I have no right to ask for anything. My company forced me to resign. My friends won't take my calls. Chloe left when the money dried up. The condo is gone. And I still have massive debts. I just wanted to see Maya, to know she's okay." "I'm fine," Maya said softly. "Because I have Mom, I have Noah, I have Arthur, and because I stopped waiting for you to change." Henry looked at his daughter with unbearable sorrow. But this time, he didn't argue. Just then, Arthur Vance walked into the diner, holding a bag of specialty coffee beans. Seeing Henry, he paused for just a second before giving a curt nod, neither mocking nor friendly. Henry stood up and bowed his head slightly toward Arthur. "Arthur, I owe your family an apology." Arthur replied evenly. "The person you owe the most is sitting right in front of you. As for the kids, the best thing you can do is not drag them back into old wounds." Henry nodded, his eyes red. A moment later, he walked out of the diner. Nobody asked him to stay, and nobody chased him out. When his silhouette disappeared into the rain, Maya walked over and hugged me from behind. "Are you sad, Mom?" I placed my hand over hers. A little. Not because I still love him the old way, but because it's a tragedy that a person has to lose absolutely everything to finally learn how to be decent. That night, the diner closed late. Noah finished fixing the lights. Maya sat at a booth sketching a new menu design. Arthur brewed a pot of the coffee he'd brought, and I stood in the back kitchen prepping the soup stock for the next day. Warm light spilled across the room. The rain outside faded to a drizzle, and I realized that the end of a marriage doesn't have to be marked by vengeance or victory. Sometimes, it's just the moment a woman can stand in her own kitchen, listen to her daughter laughing in the dining room, and know that she survived the pain without losing her own humanity. She realizes that the rest of her life, even if it started late, is wide enough to live well, to live honorably, and to live for herself. After Henry's visit in the rain, I thought my life would settle like the ocean after a gale. But it turns out that some wounds, even when they stop bleeding, leave an ache whenever the weather turns cold. And some people you thought were out of your life can still haunt you through the messes they left behind. Toward the end of the month, this business at the diner picked up thanks to a few great reviews from regulars on Yelp. I was in a good mood until Mike, my lawyer, called. His voice was grim. "Evelyn, we got a notice from a private lender regarding Henry's $150,000 loan. They're moving to place a lien on the old marital house, claiming Henry listed it as an unencumbered asset." I stopped chopping onions, the knife hitting the cutting board with a dull thud. That house was supposed to be dealt with in the divorce settlement. A portion of the equity was mine and Maya's, but more importantly, it was where I kept boxes of my mother's old photographs, Maya's childhood keepsakes, and documents. Worthless to outsiders, but to me, an entire irreplaceable lifetime. "Mike, can they legally do that?" I asked. "It's messy, Evelyn. Henry falsified documents, but we have to prove it to clear the title. I strongly advise you to secure all your original personal documents and the house deed immediately." That afternoon, I asked Noah to drive me to the old house. Maya was pregnant, so I forbade her from coming, though she stood at the diner door looking anxious. "Call me if anything happens, Mom. I'm just picking up some papers, honey." "It'll be fine," I smiled to reassure her. But when Noah parked in front of the craftsman house that used to be my home, my heart seized. The wrought iron gate was rusting at the hinges. The rose bushes along the fence had grown wild and unkempt. The living room blinds were drawn. It was heartbreakingly familiar, as if the house still held the echoes of my footsteps carrying groceries, Maya's childhood laughter, my late mother-in-law's hacking cough, and Henry's explosive yelling. Noah spoke gently. "Mom, let me go in first." I shook my head. "No. I need to do this. There are thresholds you have to cross yourself to truly leave them behind." We unlocked the front door using the key I had kept per the separation agreement. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The wooden credenza in the hallway had been pried open. Cardboard boxes in the corner were overturned. Fresh smudges smeared the dusty coffee table. Noah immediately frowned. "Mom, someone's been in here." I walked straight to the master bedroom, to the walk-in closet where I kept a fireproof lockbox hidden behind a false panel. The panel was ajar. The heavy steel lockbox was gone. My whole body ran cold. That box held my original marriage certificate, the original deed to the house, Maya's birth certificate, receipts proving I paid for home renovations, and a stack of savings bonds I had started buying secretly after filing for divorce to help Maya with the baby. Noah immediately called Mike, and then the local police. I stood in the middle of the empty bedroom, staring at the vacant space in the closet. Suddenly, a strange anger bubbled up inside me. It wasn't loud. It didn't make me shake. It just made my mind incredibly sharp. Henry had apologized, but someone was still digging through my life, trying to drag me back into a war I thought was over. When the police finished taking my statement that evening, Mike arrived. He examined the closet and asked who else knew about the hidden panel. I could only think of one person, Henry. But Noah chimed in. "Mom, remember what Chloe said at the wedding? She said Henry promised her the house would be clean cash once he sold it. She might know more about the paperwork than we think." Just hearing Chloe's name brought back the memory of her furious, calculating glare when her escrow was frozen. The next morning, Maya called me in a panic. "Mom, someone just texted me from a burner phone." "What did they say?" I gripped the counter. "They sent a picture of your lockbox. They said if you don't want complications with the deed and your savings, you need to leave $50,000 cash in a duffel bag. Mom, why won't they leave us alone? I stared at the simmering pot of chicken broth in front of me. The steam hit my face, making my eyes water. Because there are people in this world who think a kind woman is a weak woman who can be bullied forever. Send screenshots to Mike immediately, I told her. I'm not staying quiet this time. Mike quickly confirmed the burner number couldn't be traced easily, but the photo proved the extortionist had my box. Arthur Vance came to the diner when he heard the news, his face grave. Evelyn, this is extortion and grand theft. Let the police and Mike handle it. I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. Not for the money, but for Maya, who was pregnant and still being terrorized by the fallout of her mother's past. Just then, Henry appeared at the edge of the parking lot. He walked fast, his face pale. As soon as he walked in, he said, Evelyn, it wasn't me. I swear to God I didn't take the box. Noah blocked the entrance to the kitchen, his voice ice. If you know about it, then you know who did. Henry hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Chloe texted me. She said if I don't get the money to pay off the debts I owe her, she's going to sell the documents to a shady title company and drag Maya's name through the mud. I looked at Henry, not knowing whether to pity him or despise him. You brought her into your life, and now you've given her the keys to terrorize your family. Henry hung his head, his voice completely wrecked. I know. Let me fix this. I'll arrange a meet with her and get the box back. Absolutely not. Mike interrupted from the corner booth. If she is extorting you, any meetup has to be coordinated with law enforcement. If you go rogue, she could frame you. Henry looked at me, his eyes pleading with a desperate, pathetic urgency. Evelyn, I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but let me do one decent thing for my daughter. I remained silent for a long time. This man had pushed me to the absolute edge, but if he truly wanted to face the consequences of his actions, I had no right to stop the law from using him as the bait to end this nightmare. Don't do it for me, I finally said. Do it for your grandchild. And for once in your life, don't lie. That afternoon, under Mike's and the detective's supervision, Henry texted Chloe agreeing to meet at a coffee shop near the Greyhound station to hand over the first installment of cash. Plainclothes officers were positioned nearby. I didn't go. I sat in my diner, wiping down a coffee mug over and over again, my heart pounding. Maya sat next to me, one hand on her belly, the other gripping my arm. I'm scared, Mom. I squeezed her hand. I am too, baby. But being scared doesn't mean we run. 2 agonizing hours later, Mike called. His voice was light. Evelyn, we got the box. Chloe was arrested on the spot for extortion and possession of stolen property. Henry is at the precinct giving his official statement. I closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath, feeling a boulder lift off my chest. Maya burst into tears of relief, and Noah ran from the back to wrap his arms around his wife. Late that night, Henry brought the lockbox to the diner. He was accompanied by a police officer and Mike. When he set the box on the counter, he couldn't look me in the eye. I'm sorry. I know this all started because of me. I opened the box. The deeds, the certificates, the photos, everything was there. Only the corner of the savings passbook was slightly bent. I smoothed out the paper, feeling like I was smoothing out a crumpled piece of my own life. Henry, I said softly, doing one right thing doesn't erase a lifetime of wrong things. But at least today, you didn't make a new mistake. He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes, and walked out. Outside, the California coastal breeze rattled the Eve's kitchen sign. I looked at Maya leaning her head on Noah's shoulder, at Arthur standing quietly behind his son, at the warm glow of the diner lights cutting through the dark. I realized that peace isn't something that naturally falls from the sky after a storm. Peace is something you have to fiercely protect. You have to build a fence around the people you love, even if that fence is built with tears, legal injunctions, and a late-blooming courage to look the world in the eye and say, no one is allowed to hurt my family anymore. After the lockbox incident, I thought my heart would feel lighter, but in the weeks that followed, whenever I locked up the diner at night, I caught myself checking the deadbolt twice and staring down the dark street before turning off the neon sign. Not because I was weaker, but because I finally understood that for a woman who has been abused, peace isn't a switch you can just flip. You don't just hear it's over and instantly believe it. As Maya got closer to her due date, she became more sensitive. She would sit at the window booth, folding tiny baby blankets, watching me work the grill. One day, out of nowhere, she asked, "Mom, when you were pregnant with me, were you scared?" I was stirring a pot of chili, and my hand paused. Of course I was. Honey, I was scared I wouldn't be a good enough mother, scared we didn't have enough money, scared of your father's temper, scared your grandmother would be disappointed I was having a girl. But the first time you kicked, I thought to myself that as long as you were healthy, I could endure anything. Maya looked down, her hand resting on her stomach. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want my baby to ever see me cry the way I used to see you cry. That sentence cut me to the bone. I turned off the burner, wiped my hands on my apron, and sat down across from her. I took her hands in mine. Then you have to remember this. Being a wife doesn't mean swallowing your resentment. Being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left. You have Noah, who adores you. You have me. You have Arthur. Never let yourself become isolated in your own family. Noah, who was carrying a tray of clean glasses out of the kitchen, heard us. He set the tray down and crouched right in front of Maya. I can't promise I'll never make a mistake, Maya, but I promise that if you're hurting, you tell me, and I will listen. We are not letting our kid grow up in a quiet, unhappy house. Maya started crying, but it was the cry of a woman being held, not the cry of a woman abandoned. I turned back toward the kitchen, quickly wiping my eyes. I didn't want to intrude on their moment, but my heart swelled. A new family legacy could begin, with promises as simple as that. A few days later, Mike informed me that Chloe had pled out to a lesser charge, but was facing heavy fines and probation. He also mentioned that during the investigation, they discovered Henry had promised to pay Chloe out of the house sale while simultaneously taking out high-interest loans from private lenders to cover her luxury demands. The interest had compounded to a point of financial ruin. I wasn't surprised. Henry's entire life was built on ego and maintaining a facade. To protect his image, he had borrowed, lied, and built a house of cards that eventually crushed him. What did surprise me was Henry calling me that evening. I stared at the caller ID for a long time before answering. His voice was weak, the sound of wind whipping through the phone as if he were standing on a street corner. Evelyn, I know you got the legal notices. I'm not asking for a handout. Can I see Maya? Just once? I have something to give her. I paused. Maya is heavily pregnant. She doesn't need emotional stress right now. Give it to Mike. Henry let out a long sigh. Right. You're right to be careful. The next day, Mike brought a padded envelope to the diner. Inside was a standard bank passbook with Maya's name on it. The balance wasn't huge compared to what Henry had blown, about $10,000. But what shocked me was the handwritten note attached to it. Henry's handwriting was still sharp and slanted, but the strokes were shaky. He wrote that this was the very first bonus check he received after Maya was born, which he had originally put aside for her. But over the years, due to his pride, his need to show off, and his terrible choices, he forgot that he once wanted to be a good father. He wrote that he wasn't asking for Maya's forgiveness. He just wanted the baby to have a small gift from a grandfather who no longer had the right to stand beside her. I folded the letter, my heart sinking like a stone. That night, I gave the envelope to Maya. She read it over and over, tears dropping onto the ink. Mom, should I keep it? I looked at my daughter. Keep it if you feel it's a piece of the father who actually loved you. But don't keep it if you feel it's a chain binding you to forgive him. Forgiveness belongs to the heart. Nobody can force it. Not even me. Maya held the envelope to her chest and sobbed. I love him, Mom. But I'm still so angry. I don't know what to do. I stroked her. Love and anger can live in the exact same space, honey. When family hurts you, the pain is infinitely more complicated than when a stranger does. Take your time. During her final weeks of pregnancy, Maya had nightmares about the wedding. Noah would call me over in the middle of the night because she woke up hyperventilating, clinging to his shirt, asking if he would ever get bored of her, if he would ever parade another woman in front of their child. Noah didn't offer empty platitudes. He just made her warm milk and sat awake with her until sunrise. Whenever I saw them like that, my heart ached, but I was so profoundly grateful she was being loved with the patience I never had. One morning, I set a bowl of oatmeal in front of her. "Eat, sweetie. I know you're scared, but don't let your parents' nightmares move into your house." Maya took a spoonful, her voice choked. "Mom, I'm terrified I'm going to turn into the old you." I looked at her fiercely. "No, you are not me. You speak up, you demand to be heard, and your mother isn't the old me anymore either." She let out a wet, genuine laugh. As the due date approached, Arthur Vance started visiting the diner more often. Sometimes he brought fresh seafood from the harbor. Sometimes he brought a small bouquet of daisies for the counter. He was always perfectly measured. He never stepped too close, never made me feel cornered or obligated. His kindness was like the shade of a large oak tree. It was just there, offering relief without demanding you sit under it. One afternoon when the diner was empty, he watched me reorganizing the spice racks. "Evelyn, you've worked too hard for too long. After the baby comes, if you want to hire help or expand the diner, I know some reliable investors. It's not a handout, just a standard business partnership." I smiled. "Thank you, Arthur, but I want to walk slowly. My whole life, other people made my decisions for me. Now, I want to weigh every single step myself." He nodded, his eyes warm. "That's wise. People who walk slowly usually travel further." His words followed me that night as I stood scrubbing pans under the yellow kitchen light. I heard Noah's truck idle out front as he picked Maya up, calling out, "Get some rest, Mom." I realized then that my life was no longer a straight line plunging toward despair. It had branched off into beautiful little paths. A path to this diner, a path to the upcoming laughter of my granddaughter, a path to a very mature, grounded peace. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was sturdy. Maya went into labor on a stormy night, much like the night Henry had come to the diner. Noah called me, his voice shaking wildly. "Mom, her water broke. We're going to the hospital." I threw on a raincoat, locked the diner, and drove through the blinding California rain. At the hospital, Maya gripped my hand, her forehead slick with sweat, crying, "Mom, I'm scared." I kissed her forehead, saying the words I used to whisper to myself in the dark. But this time, it was a promise. "I'm right here. Noah is right here. You are not alone." Just before dawn, the first cry of a newborn echoed in the delivery room. It was fragile but powerful, slicing through all the exhaustion, the trauma, and the broken memories. Noah wept openly. Maya, utterly drained, smiled radiantly. I stood outside the door, my hands trembling, tears streaming down my face. When the nurse wrapped the baby girl in a blanket and handed her to me, I looked at her tiny, wrinkled face and felt as if a new seed had been planted in my very soul. Maya named her Haven, a short name, but it carried the hopes and prayers of 3 generations of women in our family. That from now on, the girls born to us would never have to learn to stifle their cries to keep the peace in the house. They would never have to watch their mothers bow their heads to injustice. And they would never have to grow up around dinner tables echoing with shouts and demands. I held Haven close, listening to her tiny, fragile breaths, and whispered, "Grandma can't promise your life won't have storms, but I promise you will never have to stand in them alone." When Haven was 3 days old, I finally felt comfortable holding her for longer stretches. It wasn't that I was clumsy, but the feeling of this tiny, precious life resting in the crook of my arm made me both fiercely happy and terrified, as if breathing too hard might break the miracle we had all waited for. Maya lay in the hospital bed, her face still pale from exhaustion, but her eyes had softened entirely. Every time Haven let out a tiny squeak, Maya's head would snap toward the bassinet. Seeing the anxious, clumsy love of a new mother reminded me of myself years ago, holding Maya in a small, lonely room. The only difference was that back then, I was completely alone. Now, Maya had Noah, she had me, she had Arthur, and she had hands ready to catch her before she could collapse. Noah was changing his daughter's diaper, so terrified of hurting her that he ended up taping the diaper completely crooked. Maya laughed, though she winced at the pain of her stitches. "Noah, you're wrapping her like a burrito." Noah's ears turned red. He leaned down and gently adjusted the tabs, muttering, "Sorry, Haven. Dad's still in training." I stood by watching them, smiling while tears threatened to spill. These are the most ordinary scenes of life. But for someone who had been starved of them, They were worth their weight in gold. A husband who wasn't afraid to look foolish for his child. A wife who was allowed to be weak. A child born into a room filled with laughter instead of criticism. That afternoon, Arthur Vance walked into the hospital room carrying a large thermos of homemade chicken and wild rice soup. He said he had woken up early to make it himself. Maya's eyes widened. "You know how to cook, Arthur?" Arthur smiled a gentle, wistful smile. "When Noah's mother passed away, I didn't know how. But I had to learn. Raising a child isn't just a woman's job." That simple sentence made the whole room pause. I looked at him, my heart aching with a quiet realization. Embedded in those few words was an entire way of living that I had once dreamed of, but never dared to demand. Maya looked at me, likely knowing exactly what was going through my head, and reached under the blanket to squeeze my hand. Right then, Noah's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression hardened. It was Henry. Maya froze. I didn't say anything. After everything that had happened, none of us wanted Henry to make an appearance so soon, but none of us could deny that he was Haven's grandfather. That fact sat there complex, awkward, and impossible to erase with mere anger. With Maya's nod, Noah put the phone on speaker. Henry's voice came through, soft and raspy, entirely stripped of the arrogance of the past decades. "Maya, I heard the news. Are you and the baby doing all right?" Maya looked at Haven sleeping in the bassinet. She was silent for a long moment before answering. "I'm fine. The baby is fine." Henry let out a breath, sounding like a man who had just walked 1,000 miles. Can I come see her? Just for a minute. I can stand outside the door." Maya looked at me. I didn't nod, and I didn't shake my head. "This is your decision." Maya bit her lip. "I'm tired today, Dad. Give it a few days. I need time." The line was quiet for a long time. "Okay. I understand. Get some rest. Tell her Grandpa says hello." The call ended. Maya turned her face toward the window, tears soaking into her pillow. Noah leaned down and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "You didn't do anything wrong, Maya." "I know," she choked out. "But why does it still hurt so much?" I walked over and stroked my daughter's hair. "Because the person hurting you is your father. Some wounds don't require immediate forgiveness. They just require you to stop letting them control you." 3 weeks later, Maya was back home recovering. I closed the diner for a couple of weeks to help her with the baby, while Arthur and Noah took turns checking on the restaurant and keeping things in order. Those weeks at Maya's house were filled with the smell of baby lotion, warm laundry, and hot soup. There were midnight cries, the sound of Noah singing off-key lullabies, and moments where Maya would snap from sleep deprivation, only to cry because she felt guilty for snapping. I didn't judge her. I knew that being a mother isn't always the picture-perfect painting people make it out to be. There are nights when a woman sits in the dark with messy hair and milk-stained clothes, loving her child so fiercely she can hardly breathe, while simultaneously panicking that she has lost her own identity. One early morning, I found Maya sitting in the living room, Haven asleep on her chest. Maya had dark circles under her eyes. "Mom, I'm scared I'm not good enough." I sat down next to her and gently lifted Haven into my own arms. No mother is perfect from the start. I wasn't. The difference is that you are allowed to say it out loud. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to lean on your husband and your mother. Don't turn your love for your child into a rope around your own neck. Maya leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she did when she was a little girl. "Did anyone ever tell you that back then?" "Mom?" I smiled a sad smile. "No, which is exactly why I'm telling you now. When Haven was a month old, Henry sent a package through Noah. He asked not to visit the house if Maya wasn't ready. Inside the box was a small silver baby bracelet and a short card. Maya read the card and set it on the coffee table. Henry wrote that he didn't expect to hold his granddaughter right away. He only hoped that as Haven grew up, she would know her grandfather had made many terrible mistakes, but that he was finally learning how to stop hurting the people he loved. Maya stared at the little silver bracelet for a long time before telling Noah to put it in the drawer. "When she's older, I'll tell her the story." Without making her hate anyone, but without hiding the truth. I felt a profound sense of relief. That was my Maya, not weak, not bitter. She knew how to feel pain without letting it turn into poison. We had a small dinner to celebrate Haven's 1-month milestone at Arthur's house. It was just family. I held my granddaughter and watched Noah awkwardly pour drinks for everyone. I watched my brother, Thomas, who had driven down from Northern California, laughing until his eyes crinkled as he held his grandniece. I watched Arthur set a small plate of food in front of a framed photo of his late wife, whispering, "We have a grandchild now, honey." In that moment, a lump formed in my throat. A family isn't a place devoid of loss or heartbreak. It's a place where people know how to respectfully set the broken pieces aside and come together to nurture whatever is still alive. At the end of the night, Arthur stepped out onto the patio and stood next to me. The coastal breeze was cool, and inside, we could hear Haven let out a sharp cry before being instantly shushed by Noah. Arthur looked out at the dark neighborhood, speaking slowly. "Evelyn, after everything that's happened, I see now that you're even stronger than you realize." I shook my head. "I'm not strong, Arthur. I just ran out of places to hide. I had no room left to be weak." He turned to look at me, his eyes incredibly warm, yet maintaining that respectful distance. To have no room left, and still choose to walk a decent path, that is strength. I didn't reply. I only smiled. What I felt inside wasn't the rushed, desperate butterflies of youth, nor was it a need to cling to another man to prove my worth. If something was taking root, it was slower, more hidden. Like a tree branch after a storm, it didn't need a name yet. It just needed the sunlight to touch it. That night, when I returned to the diner, I unlocked the door, flipped the lights on, and looked at my quiet kitchen waiting for me. I placed a baby blanket Maya had forgotten on a chair and sat down, listening to the ticking clock. It took me nearly 30 years to understand that a woman doesn't need to be chosen by someone else to start over. She doesn't need a picture-perfect family to find peace, and she doesn't need to forget all her pain to be allowed to be happy. The world outside was still uncertain. Henry would always be a scar in Maya's story. Chloe was currently facing the legal consequences of her choices. And I still had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to prep food, pay commercial rent, run a business, and care for my kids. But for the first time in decades, those responsibilities didn't feel like shackles. They felt like anchors, keeping me grounded on the piece of earth I had claimed for the rest of my life. As the months went by, a new sound became a permanent fixture at Eve's kitchen. It wasn't the chopping of knives or customers asking for extra napkins. It was the sound of a baby's laugh, played from the short audio clips Maya texted me every morning. Sometimes Haven would just babble. Sometimes she'd cry for milk. Yet, I found myself replaying them while prepping vegetables at the prep station, as if those tiny sounds were scrubbing clean the dark corners of my mind. Just as life seemed to settle, Mike Sterling stopped by the diner one afternoon and placed a manila envelope on the counter. It was a notice from the bankruptcy courts. Henry's legal team was filing to extend the timeline for the financial restitution he owed me, claiming total insolvency. I held the paper, reading each line slowly. I wasn't surprised, but a wave of exhaustion washed over me. Because sometimes, even after you've walked away, other people's mistakes still try to hand you the bill. "Evelyn, we have the right to object," Mike said. "But I want you to mentally prepare yourself. This process could drag out." I nodded and set the paper down. "Stick to the law, Mike. I don't want a penny more than what is rightfully mine, but I'm not yielding another inch." Mike looked at me, a look of genuine respect crossing his face. "You sound very different from the woman who walked into my office a year ago." I laughed. A year ago, I thought asking for what was mine made me greedy. Later that afternoon, Henry called. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. His voice was faint, accompanied by the sound of traffic in the background. "Evelyn, I know you got the notice. I'm not asking you to drop it. I'm just begging for a little more time. I'm working as a night security guard now. The pay isn't much. I'll pay you back, I swear, but I can't do it all at once." I was silent. In the past, the moment Henry lowered his voice, I would have caved. I would have told myself, well, he was my husband once. But now I knew that pity could easily turn into a trapdoor, dropping me right back into the dark. "Henry, you need to speak with Mike regarding the finances. I am not discussing money with you privately anymore." Henry sighed. "You still don't trust me." "No. It's just that I finally learned that trust requires collateral." The line went dead quiet. A moment later, Henry asked softly. Can I see Haven? My heart sank. You need to ask Maya and Noah. She is their daughter, not a participation trophy for your regrets. I hung up. I wasn't angry, but my hands were cold. That night, I told Maya about the call. She held Haven against her chest, watching her daughter sleep for a long time before she spoke. Mom, I don't want to ban him from seeing his grandchild forever, but I'm terrified he's going to hurt you again. Or hurt me. Noah, sitting nearby, spoke up, his voice a low, steady rumble. We can set conditions. He can meet us in a public place. Mom or I will be there. No talking about money. No bringing up the past in front of the baby. If he crosses a line, we leave. I looked at my son-in-law, silently thanking him for not forcing Maya to be the bigger person and for not throwing gasoline on her anger. Maya nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. Okay, once. Not because I've forgotten, but because I don't want Haven growing up thinking adults only know how to hate each other. A week later, Henry met Haven for the first time at my diner. He came on a slow Tuesday morning, wearing a faded polo shirt, the collar frayed. He was holding a small plastic grocery bag with a few oranges and some baby bibs. It was a gift so painfully modest that the Henry of the past would have mocked it as peasant trash. When Maya carried Haven out, Henry shot up from his chair. His eyes instantly went red. He reached his hands out, then pulled them back, as if he didn't believe he had the right to touch something so pure. Can I hold her for a minute? Maya looked at Noah, then at me. Finally, she gently placed Haven into Henry's arms. He held her with a stiff, terrified clumsiness, but the look in his eyes completely melted. Hi, Haven. It's Grandpa. Haven blinked, her tiny mouth forming an O, before she closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. Henry let out a choked laugh, which instantly shattered into a sob. I turned my face away. I didn't want to be pulled into the gravity of pity too soon. Henry stood there. For the first time in his life, he didn't brag about his business. He didn't show off his watch. He didn't bark orders. He just quietly held a baby, letting the silence teach him the exact weight of what he had thrown away. But that fragile peace was abruptly shattered when the front door of the diner swung open. A middle-aged woman marched in, dressed in flashy designer clothes, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. She spotted Henry, then looked at me, her voice dripping with venom. Well, so this is where you're hiding. And you must be Evelyn. Henry went ghost white. Mrs. Harmon. Why are you here? I set down the coffee pot. Can I help you? The woman pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited, smirking. I'm the private lender your ex-husband borrowed from. He promised me a payment this week. But I heard his ex-wife seized all his assets, so I came to get the story straight. Maya immediately pulled Haven out of Henry's arms and held her tight. Noah stepped forward. Ma'am, this is a restaurant. If you have a dispute with him, take it outside. Do not harass my family or my child. Mrs. Harmon rolled her eyes. I'm talking to the adults, kid. Back off. I stood up straight, my voice dropping to a calm, icy register. Mrs. Harmon, Henry and I are divorced. His private debts have absolutely nothing to do with me, my daughter, or my grandchild. If you have legal claims, take it up with him or the courts, she sneered. You talk real tough. You lived high on the hog on your husband's dime for years. And now that he's drowning, you wash your hands of him? I stared her down. It struck me how often society uses these exact scripts to punish women. When a husband is rich, the wife is a gold digger. When he's in debt, she's obligated to go down with the ship because she owed him her loyalty. I took nothing from him except what the law dictated was mine after 30 years of marriage, I said clearly. If you lent out money without checking the financial solvency of your borrower, that is your poor risk management. It is not my moral obligation to bail you out. Mrs. Harmon flinched. She clearly hadn't expected the beaten-down housewife to talk back with such precision. Henry stepped between us. Mrs. Harmon, my mess is mine to clean up. Do not ever come here again. She slammed her hand on the table. Clean it up with what, Henry? Your minimum wage security checks? Just then, Arthur walked into the diner. He assessed the situation in a split second, walked over to stand beside me, and spoke in his commanding, effortless tone. If there is any further harassment or extortion happening on these premises, I will have the police here in 3 minutes. This is a legitimate business, not a collection agency. Arthur's presence made Mrs. Harmon hesitate. She looked around, noticed a couple of customers holding their phones up, and abruptly stood. She pointed a manicured finger at Henry. You better figure it out, Henry. Don't make me play hardball. When the door slammed behind her, the diner fell dead silent. Henry hung his head, his voice ruined. I'm sorry, I brought trouble to your door again. I looked at him. I didn't yell, but I didn't comfort him either. Henry, if you truly want to be a decent grandfather, the first step is cleaning up your own life. Don't let your debts, your lies, and your ego walk through my daughter's door ever again. He nodded, tears spilling over his lashes. I understand. The next day, I had security cameras installed at the diner. Noah helped me pick them out, and Arthur brought over a trusted contractor, though he made sure I paid the invoice myself. I loved that boundary. It gave me the profound feeling of being respected as an equal. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, I held Haven near the front window, looking out at the rain-slicked California street. She was sleeping in my arms, her breaths as light as silk. Behind me, my kitchen was warm and glowing the life I had built from the rubble. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be perfectly smooth. Henry still had to pay for his choices. Maya still needed time to heal. And I still had to learn how to keep my empathy from turning into blind sacrifice. But as Haven shifted in my arms, I realized something vital. Peace isn't the absence of storms knocking at your door. Peace is knowing that when the storm comes, you have deadbolts, you have security cameras, you have people standing shoulder to shoulder with you, and you have the absolute courage to say, this place is no longer open to my old wounds. Months later, Henry's debts finally made their way through the formal legal system, halting the shady loan sharks from showing up. Chloe was heavily fined and placed on probation, and my life, for the very first time, was filled with mornings where I didn't wake up with my heart pounding. I still woke up at 4:30 a.m. to prep the kitchen. I still washed pots, managed the register, and balanced the books. But every action felt deliberate. And there was Arthur, occasionally sitting at the corner booth with a cup of black coffee, reading the morning paper. He was a quiet, constant presence like a sturdy oak tree that had always belonged there. During the holidays that year, we didn't go back to the old house. Thomas hosted Thanksgiving up in Northern California. The table was covered in roast turkey, mashed potatoes, and my mother's famous cranberry sauce recipe. The smells of my childhood filled the room. Thomas poured me a glass of wine and looked at me across the table. Evelyn, you look different this year. I smiled. Older, Tommy? He shook his head. No. Lighter. My eyes pricked with tears. People always wish each other wealth, success, and luck during the holidays. But for me, after everything I had survived, being told I looked lighter was the greatest blessing of all. For Haven's first birthday, we threw a small party at the diner. Maya baked a smash cake, Noah hung up balloons, and Thomas mailed down a massive box of toys. Arthur carried Haven around the diner, letting her point at the neon signs. Henry came too. He stood outside the glass door for a long time, holding a small stuffed bear. This time, Maya went out to greet him. She didn't hug him, but she took the bear and said, "Come inside, Dad. Have a piece of cake with your granddaughter." Henry bowed his head, crying quietly. The party wasn't picture perfect. There were cracks in the room that would never fully seal, but it was real. And that reality is what made me feel at peace. Henry sat at the end of a long table, quietly watching Haven laugh. Arthur walked by and poured Henry a cup of coffee. The two men who had stood on opposite sides of a life-shattering day gave each other a brief, silent nod. They didn't need to be friends. They just needed enough grace to ensure the children didn't have to suffer their tension. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone on the sidewalk outside Eve's kitchen. The neon sign buzzed softly in the cool California night. The smell of vanilla cake still lingered in the air. I remembered Maya's wedding day. I remembered Henry parading Chloe onto the stage. I remembered the suffocating silence of the ballroom. I remembered the sound of my own clapping, echoing through my humiliation. And I remembered Arthur Vance bowing deeply to me, like a hand reaching down to pull me out of a grave. If I hadn't stood up that day, I would still be in that old house. I would still be blaming myself, waiting for a man who didn't value me to suddenly become a decent human being. But I did stand up. And from the ashes of that bitter applause, my life branched out onto a brand new road. I turned off the neon sign, walked back inside, and locked the door. I saw Maya dozing in a booth with Haven resting on her chest, while Noah gently draped a jacket over his wife's shoulders. Arthur was quietly wiping down the last of the tables. "Arthur, leave it," I whispered. "I'll get that." He looked up and smiled. "Rest, Evelyn. Today you're the grandmother of the hour." I let out a soft, genuine laugh that echoed through the small diner that had witnessed my resurrection. I was no longer the pathetic, tragic wife in Henry's story, nor was I a victorious gladiator demanding applause. I was just Evelyn. A mother, a grandmother, a woman who had finally learned how to hold on to her own dignity. If anyone were to ask me what the most precious thing in the world is after surviving all of this, I would tell them it isn't money. It isn't revenge. It isn't even finding a new man. It is this exact, ordinary evening, when the people you love are safe, when your heart is no longer gripped by fear, and when you lock your own front door at night, knowing that the lights inside still shine brightly, completely under your own control.